Of course, here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church, we allow for questions following the sermon in the morning. I might as well tell you that chapters 1 through 5 have sort of been, from a pastoral standpoint and from a preaching standpoint, I'm calling that the easy part. Things get tougher going forward. So I think this is my last Sunday in Revelation of easy questions. If indeed your questions will be easy this morning, or your comments, they're going to get tougher. But based on what we said this morning, this picture of true worship of Christ, who has the first question, the first comment? Yeah, John.
You made a point about false gods don't help people out. You know, they're there for you to feel good about yourself and to get to manipulate them. Now, how do you reconcile that with, say, the Hindus who threw themselves in front of the juggernaut, or Muslims who feel like they're going to go to heaven directly by doing suicide bombings or those kinds of things? I mean, they're not manipulating, I think, in the sense that you implied.
Yeah, I see a difference between the, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but if you know about Hindu type worship, first of all, don't believe the people that say that all gods are the same. How many here, and I want to get to John's question, how many here know what the juggernaut actually was? Yeah. The juggernaut was this huge kind of a contraption. Is that best? Yeah, rolling platform. Yeah, I guess that's the best way to say it. That was dragged out, that at one time, I don't know if they do this anymore in India or not, due to the influence of Carey and others, but when William Carey first goes to India, India is just overcome with Hindu type worship, Hindu worship. And the ultimate act of worship, they have, some people believe they have actually 3 million gods, goddesses, whatever. But what Carey observed, and you will not read this in your history book, you certainly won't read in your comparative religions course at your local high school, public high school, if you will. You won't read this, but what this juggernaut thing would be pulled along, and it'd be a grand worship ceremony, and this thing was a huge platform with huge wheels. And can you guess what the ultimate act of worship was as this huge thing was being pulled along? I'm going to ask you to guess. Maybe you already know, but you don't want to say. Did I tell you before? I have? I was going to say, okay, who remembers? I'm just kidding. Yeah, so this is a test. Yeah, they would throw themselves from the wheel and an act of suicide, an ultimate... That was actually said at home. No, I'm just kidding. No. Yeah, one of our home worship services. Yeah. No, I think it was actually said here. Yeah, that's what they would do. The ultimate act of worship was to kill themselves.
The juggernaut couldn't be stopped.
Right.
They would throw themselves in front of it.
Yep.
And that's why we use that term as a juggernaut. It's unstoppable.
Right. Something that,
it's big and heavy and moving.
Yes.
A lot of inertia.
Right. And generally, we're talking about something destructive. Usually, a juggernaut. A lot of people don't know the idea of the juggernaut was actually a term that came from India, if you will, the juggernaut. And so that is what I want to bring around then to the whole Islamic thing. In Islam, as the way I understand it, the only way you can guarantee that you're going to go to paradise is if you die fighting infidels. So in both cases, you have this, the grandest act of sincerity is to kill yourself, if you will. Now, I'm trying to answer your question. Tell me the...
Well, you said people that worship false gods, pagan worship, is manipulating those gods to help you here.
Yeah. Yeah. And so your question...
I mean, that doesn't kind of fit with committing suicide. That's not helping you here.
Okay. Yeah. If you say it this way, that the ultimate act of worship, if you will, is to commit suicide, which is what I would argue is the case in in Hinduism. And your question is how's that actually help you? Well, in the case of, I think in both cases, it's the ultimate act of sacrifice. And in the case of of Islam, they believe that you'll walk across this kind of a tightrope type thing, and if you haven't been faithful to Allah, you fall into hell. In the case of Hinduism, you are reincarnated. So I think that's the benefit in both cases. It doesn't look like much of a benefit to us because you're killing yourself. But in their thinking, this is a benefit to each one of them. In the case of Islam, you get to walk across it's like a tightrope type of a thing. You walk across with hell beneath, and all the unfaithful fall into it. But you don't fall into it if you die a martyr, if you will. In the case of Islam, you're going to be Hinduism, you're going to be reincarnated. So in the end, it is a benefit to them. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. As well as I can do it. Anyway, in other words, to us, it looks like destruction, and it is. To them, and this is a problem with any anti-Christian philosophy. I mean, think of communism, for example. In communism, destruction is actually construction. And when you get into pagan religions and pagan thoughts, things are so opposite that what looks to us from the Bible is bad and evil. It's like good, and good is evil. Give you a real quick example of that. I think I've given this example before, but speaking of Hindus, the early Christian missionaries got in a lot of trouble by helping beggars. And you read about the condition they found people. It was horrible. If you ever get a chance to do this, read about the conditions in India, especially when the early missionaries went there. Conditions of people who were beggars by the side of the road, in some cases literally being rotting, and no one helping them. We've talked about this before. The missionaries come, and they want to help these people, right? How do you think the locals handled that? The locals say, "Thank you, missionaries, for coming and helping these people. Our religion won't let us do it, but thank you." No, they said, no, you're messing with karma here. You Christian missionaries, you're messing with karma. This person is suffering because he's sinned in an earlier life. Now he's working off his sins, and if you give him relief, he won't be able to work off his sins, and you're probably guaranteeing him to be born badly in the next life. You're doing harm. And this is Christianity and everything else are just opposites. This idea that all religions are the same, that would be news to your basic Hindu who sees somebody being eaten alive by worms by the side of the road, to put it nicely. Yes?
What do certain groups do, like, I guess, Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff with this chapter in Revelation, where there's worship being given to the Lamb, where, there's places throughout Scripture in Psalm and even out of Christ's mouth in Matthew about worship being exclusively for God,
right,
and no one else.
Yeah.
But then in Revelation we have clear worship of the Lamb.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on this, but my experience with them is this. As I've talked to them, they will say that Christ deserves worship, but they have a problem with that with a comprehensive type of worship that we talked about here this morning. So I don't know what they do with that passage itself, but they will admit that Christ is, as a God, deserves some form of worship. They will, in my experience, they will do that. I don't know if anybody else has any input on that at all, but that's been my experience with them. He's a God. That's what they say. Jehovah's Witness, for example, in the beginning was a word. That's how they start out. It is a pagan view, though, because in as far as God is concerned, He deserves exclusive worship. This again is the problem. It was the problem in Rome. It wasn't that the Romans wouldn't give God worship, the God of the Bible, or Christ. actually, the little church. They worshiped Christ as God. The Romans said you can worship him as a God. It's just that you can't forget our other gods. And the Christians said, actually, no, they're not gods. They're false gods. We're only going to worship this one. And that's what really got them in trouble. And that's what I believe Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, they all do the same kind of a thing. We're going to put him as a God. And as far as that is concerned, I mean, I know that Jehovah's Witnesses and some of these people, they come to us and they look like us, I guess, right? Dressed like us. They're not dressed like the Hare Krishnas with the funny robes and the thing growing out of the back of their head. They look like us and it fakes us out, but in the end, they're the same, I would argue. Has anybody seen any Hare Krishnas at the airport lately? It's been a while. I don't. They used to hang around the airports. When I was a teenager, they had their orange outfits, long outfits, and they were. It's been years since I've seen those guys. Has anybody ever not seen the Hare Krishnas at an airport? Raise your hand if you've never seen them. It has seriously been a while. Okay, yeah, it has. Oh, is that what it is? Where do they hang out now? Okay. I just realized I kind of miss them. They used to be at the airport all the time. Yeah, looking for flowers, wanting to pin flowers on you. Them and yeah. I do recall this. But and they look different. See, they look different from the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses. But I'm arguing today they're the same. They are. Who else has a question this morning? Yes, Dave.
You were talking about Revelation, about comprehensive worship on this in the sea, all the creatures. I mean, doesn't Romans 8 kind of? We know that the whole creation has been growing, like it looks like trees, everything. Doesn't that kind of explain
Answer
that?
our question for us.
Answer the question that it's the entire creation?
Yeah.
Rocks?
Yeah, trees and trees of the hills shall clap their hands, for example. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it looks like, but that's not really giving us a picture of what it looks like. It's just saying what is, not what it looks like, is what that's doing. Yeah.
Christ, like you were saying, we don't need to know what it looks like.
Right.
We just have faith that
Right.
that's what it is.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. Paul says we walk by faith, not by sight. What we say is we walk by sight, not by faith, meaning we won't believe it unless we can see it. Rather it is, if God has actually said it, is that not good enough for us to believe it? Yes?
The only thing that I can compare a picture of what is going on in heaven that I can compare to a similar experience on earth, where collectively human beings are together in an act of worship, emotionally and loudly and exalting what is ahead in front of them, is the Super Bowl. I just feel like that is a picture in heaven of what it's a very poor example of it, because it's not all of creation, but it's all of humanity is exalting and worshiping, and they're totally out of themselves into exalting what's going on out there on the field. And millions of people are watching that around the world and experiencing it. That's the only thing on earth that I can compare to that we will do in a very holy way around the throne. That's, along with all of creation.
Anybody have anything to, yes?
As she's saying that, I have been sitting here thinking of a very large Pentecostal church where there is a lot of loud worship, and are we too critical? You know, we're praying, let it be on earth as it is in heaven. Are we too critical of that kind of worship?
I think we're way too critical myself. I get it And we always say, well, you can get carried away, right? And you can, and that's true. You can turn down your critical facilities, and you should never do that in worship or any time. There's never time to do that. I believe that's why the Bible really attacks getting drunk, because your critical facilities are dulled. But that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean you can't be loud. It doesn't mean that. You can be loud and still be using your brain. Yeah. 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 So and so while we criticize, in the circles I've grown up all my life, we criticize those who are loud. Let's say in the Pentecostals, if you will, and the circles I'm in, we've done that. But can they not say a few things about us? Where's our enthusiasm, if you will? Where's our loud voices, if you will? And it's not just Pentecostals. I mean, you read like worship services in the Old Testament, the temple and so forth. It got loud. And in my circles, I don't really know what that's like too much. I just don't. But I think, any more thoughts on this Super Bowl illustration here, which is kind of uncomfortable for everybody? Yeah.
I'll take off on that a little bit. Well, that's a pagan worship, and it truly is, the Super Bowl. If you've ever been in an auditorium to sing Handel's Messiah, everybody's singing from the same page, and that's what's going on here in Revelation 5. And that's worship, and it's loud, and it's uplifting, and it is offering up a service to God. It's a lot of people singing loudly, worshiping, and I see that as what Audrey's talking about. It's a hint of what might be going on there. Obviously, there's not as many people there singing the Hallelujah chorus and singing the Messiah. But, you can be in an auditorium of 5,000 people. That's a lot of voices. And it's thrilling. And it's along the same lines. It's just a peek. It's a little peek behind the curtain sometimes.
Yeah. You ever been in a large choir singing? It's a wonderful experience. It's a thrilling experience. It is. And that's what I think of when I see this. All these people saying the same thing at the same time in such a picture here. Yes, Elena.
So this wasn't my experience, but I know that my sister said that when she and her husband were in Afghanistan and the Christians would meet, they were from all different countries. And so she said, sometimes, and I don't know what songs they were, like it had to been songs that like everyone kind of knew. But she said that gave her a taste of heaven because it was all these people singing in their own language, singing the same song. So she just said that was like so beautiful experience. So that just made me wonder, like in heaven then, are we going to always speak in the same language?
We will know.
We'll just kind of understand.
I don't know if this is the way I see that, answer that question. And I'll probably open myself up for criticism on this point, unlike everything else I've said this morning. I don't know if we'll all be able to speak the same, or all be speaking the same language. I do believe we'll be able to understand it, even if it is different. That's really the best I can do with that. In the picture that you're talking about there in Afghanistan, though, true Christians love true worship. This is the wonderful thing about Christ. The world is divided up along all kinds of lines: geographic, racial, historic, religious, economic. But there's nothing like the worship of Christ comprehensively to destroy every single one of those lines. All of them. And that's what we see happening right here, I think. All lines are destroyed by Christ that divide people. If we seek unity, people talk about unity all the time. The only unity I see really working is Christ. That's it. I don't see any other kind.
Amen.
Yeah. Next, somebody's going to be raising their hands. They'll be throwing people out of our stiff church here. It's funny. I had a conversation with somebody raising hands. And somebody said, "Oh, you raise hands?" I said, "Oh, we don't, but we should." Why? He said, "Well, the Bible actually says, Peter, I wish that all men were lifting holy hands." It's like actually in the Bible. It's okay. Actually commanded in the Bible. Not in my tradition, but I'm telling you, this chapter challenges me a lot. Yeah.
Maybe there can be, I don't know if I'm right about this or not, but maybe there can be two different philosophies that each could produce a lot of noise. One would be people are excited, forgetting about themselves and being excited about worshiping God, and that could produce a lot of noise. On the other hand, you could be using noise to psych people up so that they can have their own emotional fulfillment and forget about, like you talked about, this centrality of Christ in worship.
Yeah, I think the answer, the best I can do with that, is the more it's focused on Christ, the louder you're allowed to be. Something like that. The less it's focused on Christ, the more critical maybe you need to be. And thinking about this and considering it. This loud worship here is definitely seriously focused on Christ. That lesson is like impossible to get around, really, in the passage. Yes, Wes?
Things, I've been to a Pentecostal service before, and it was loud, but it was chaotic. Makes sense? There's order here.
Yeah, there's definitely order in this.
There's order, and it's very loud, but there's still order. You know what I mean? I think that's just a major difference. I don't know if we've seen a really, really loud service with order. I don't know if we've ever.
Has anybody ever seen that? A really loud service with order? Anybody ever? Sounds like a disorder to me. I don't know. I mean, they're not saying the same thing. I mean, here we have people saying the same thing. I mean, it's very. You're right. It's very loud and it's very orderly. We have the words that they're saying. There's definite order going on here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, if we have and I know in some of my friends, my Reformed friends, they don't like the noise because they believe it leads to disorder. But does it have to? Apparently not here. And I get it, this is in heaven, but we have this picture of what's going on in heaven for a reason. Yes?
Aren't we, I'm trying to find it, so it might be a figment of my imagination, but aren't we called to have an orderly worship?
Yeah. Yeah. Let everything be done decently in order. And Paul's complaining about everyone has a psalm and everyone has this and everybody, and it's disorderly and it's a mess.
Reverence and all fear and trembling and humility.
All that is.
I mean, all of that is, so when you see these people dancing and falling on the floor and stuff like that, isn't that distracting from true worship?
I have to be careful how I answer this. David dances before the Lord. And Bathsheba looks out the window and says, "You are embarrassing yourself." Yeah. Did I say Bathsheba? Michael, excuse me, got the wrong one. It's one of the problems of having more than one wife. Wrong wife. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I don't think I've ever said what's her name. Have I ever said that? No, hope not. Got one wife, thankfully. Yeah, Michael was embarrassed by her husband. David basically puts her on the shelf, it looks like, because it says that she never had another child after that. It seems, it's what seems to me going on here is great enthusiasm under control. That's the best way I can say this. if you've ever seen some worship services that are, I mean, it looks like it's going crazy out there. You don't know what's happening, and it doesn't look like it's decently in order. What we seem to have here is tremendous enthusiasm, tremendous noise, tremendous emotion in order. And it seems like that's our problems here. It seems like the Presbyterian side, if you will, if I can pick on them for a minute, will sacrifice the enthusiasm for the order. And it seems like the Pentecostal side will sacrifice the order for the enthusiasm. As a general rule. I would not say that across the board. I'm saying generally. Anyway, anybody want to argue with that one? Yes.
Not an argument, I just wanted to say, in like more charismatic churches, or like charismatic worship, I guess I should say, a lot of churches will pride themselves on the fact that they don't have a bulletin because they're going to be led by the Spirit. They want the Spirit, the Holy Spirit to take control and kind of, so they don't want to be like stuck in this order of worship or whatever. So I think what we see in Revelation is like a true worship service that's being led by the Spirit. So it's like everyone's doing the same thing at the same time. Because that was always my thing is, okay, if you're being led by the Spirit, then everyone should be doing this. It shouldn't be chaotic. Like, if you're truly being led by the Spirit, then it should be like, it should be orderly.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably what you see there, is they're truly being led by the Spirit. Everyone knows when they're supposed to bow down.
Right.
You know, they probably don't have a bulletin.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's just the Holy Spirit is.
Yeah. That's the amazing thing about this worship service. It's very loud and it's very orderly at the same time. It is a definite orderly worship service that we just saw. And of course, the let's call them the anti-Pentecostals, Presbyterians and Baptists, for one, what they'll do is they'll attack and say, you think you're being led by the Spirit, you're being led by the spirits, is what they'll say. Look at it, you're all over the place, and then that's the end of the discussion just is over with. I mean, I would like to seriously see a discussion start with this passage about true worship. Start there and move out, rather than just kind of like attacking everybody else. Can we combine, can we possibly combine the enthusiasm, if you will, of some that we would call Pentecostal with the discernment of some that we would call Presbyterian? Can that be done, or do we have to be in one or the other, one camp or the other? Yes.
Being loud doesn't necessarily mean that you're crazy.
No, loud does not equal wrong.
I mean,
Absolutely
you're
not.
indicating that there's thousands upon thousands of people, well, angels and you know, there, so
Yeah.
obviously it's going to be loud. If any of them, half of them say anything,
Yeah.
it's going to be loud.
Yep.
I mean, so I don't think that the charismatic idea is necessarily matches what they're describing here.
No, not necessarily. What my experience has been, just Joel's experience, is that oftentimes the louder it is, the more chaotic it can be, which is, I believe is not right. But then on the other hand, the quieter it is, then the more orderly it is. But honestly, if it's always quiet all the time, are we not getting away from, I mean, the scriptures say, praise him with a loud, I mean, the Bible clearly does connect volume with worship at some points. Everybody agree with that point? It clearly does. And so we want to, and that's throughout the Psalms. And so what we want to do is we say, well, we don't want to mess with the worship, so we'll be real quiet. But we are I would argue we are sacrificing something. We can't seem to put order together with volume. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Can we put order and volume together? Can we do this?
I think some of the larger Presbyterian churches with their big choirs might have some of that, though.
Yeah, they have the order. Presbyterians have the order now.
I think they also have, like, I've been to Westminster.
Yeah.
It's not quiet in there
Yeah.
when they're singing.
Yeah. Yeah, when they get the choir going, they get everybody singing, you get some noise going on. Yeah. No, it's true. You're right. There are exceptions to what I'm saying. I'm mostly talking about tendencies, if you will, that that I've seen. I get really nervous when things get out of control in a worship service. I get like, whoa, what exactly are we doing here? And so I tend to be that way. Hey, let's get it right even if we're quiet, right? Versus the possibility of getting it wrong and getting all excited about everything. But here we definitely see the combination in this worship service in heaven. Absolutely we do. No doubt about it. Yes, Jim.
Take a big pipe and you crank up a mighty fortress. You have noise and order.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, LCBC had a really loud band. Or not the LCB, yeah, I like the route there.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen that in some of our more contemporary churches where you get the noise, but I've looked around oftentimes, and I know I've said this before, I've seen this case where we have the big band, it's dark out there and the band up front is blasting away, and I look around and the band's singing, but a lot of times the congregation isn't. They don't know what's coming next, and I've observed this. Some of you guys can challenge me on this if you want. This is what I've observed. People start singing in the beginning because they know it, but as the band gets more and more, creative, you have less and less singing. You definitely do not see this here. Everybody's involved. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just something I have observed. No, worship bands are always in front. Yeah, they are. Yeah, the worship wars. That's what we're talking about here this morning. All right, well, we've gone a little bit longer this morning. Thank you for your attention here this morning. Thank you, John.
Crank it up.